All right. We want to thank you for joining us today. Today's agenda. We have, I'm Christine Killowen, consultant at CERC. My colleague Steve Brown is still not with us. Steve Prophet is still not with us. He will be joining us after he comes back from a short leave, but we do miss him. I am also here with our CSTE partners, Carrie Sullivan, Custer, and Jay Brown. Today we have an exciting presentation by Attendance Works with High School Bright Spots, and we have a partner district with us, Bassick High School, who's going to speak on chronic absenteeism work. So we welcome Inika Williams, Helen Duffy, and Dr. Joseph Raiola into the space. I'm going to also wrap up by just a quick updates of what's coming, and also some contact information in the end. Just quickly, some CSTE updates from the Superintendent's Digest. And if you would like any more information on these, on anything that you see here, there's a QR code down below on the right hand of the screen. There's also the link that you can follow as well, that's embedded in the slide. So looking quickly through this, there is some information on the emergency certification funding for free school meals guidance. There's also a survey on vacancies and teaching endorsements, special service endorsements, and instructional paraprofessionals. As a lot know, there is a right now current shortage out there. So this information is really helpful, and this survey is very helpful as well. We have some information on out-of-town magnet school transportation grant application. CSTE also launches grades 3 to 5 model math curricula and 6 to 8 model math curricula publisher alignment guides. There is the profile performance report for 21-22 that can be found, some information on that. Administration of the reading survey requirement. Also, just to let everybody know that there was an extension to the free school meals. And right now that went through the legislature, and Governor Lamont has a notice out just applauding the efforts that they did. Then there's the Connecticut State Department of Education that launched the No Matter What campaign. And that campaign is about highlighting resources for students experiencing homelessness and housing instability. And there is a notice on just from the committee, the Manufacturer CT Workforce Development Committee. So if anybody would like any of that information, it is on the slides, or you could visit the actual Superintendent's Digest website to find this. And now I am going to turn it over to Carrie Sullivan Custer.
Thank you, Christine. Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to see you today after a long weekend. I'm going to be very brief. I am very excited about our presenters from our national partners at Attendance Works today, and to hear about what's happening in Bridgeport at the high school level. So I'm going to kind of go through this quickly, but I wanted to make sure, I don't know if anyone has seen this or not. I know I see it in my social media feed. But if you have seen it, just why don't you put a little chat, a note in the chat. But CSTE has launched a new awareness campaign called No Matter What, School is for Everyone. And it is, and there's other things like school is here for your child. And it's a campaign to help families and schools recognize the issues facing children who are in unstable housing and their families. And I'm really excited about this. You know, this connects. There's a real strong connection with this issue and attendance. As you know, chronic absence for students who are in unstable housing. McKinney-Vento is our highest group of students for attendance for chronic absence. And there's what do they call these QR codes here for you? There's a web page. It brings you to a web page with resources for help, to get answers, to help spread the word. There's similar to Attendance Works awareness campaign every year, there's social media artwork that districts can use themselves. But mostly we hope to get more students both enrolled and stay in school no matter what, regardless of what their housing situation is. So I'm really excited about that. And I see many people have seen it, so that's great. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is still the December data. January data is going to be out later this week. So I showed this the last talk Tuesday, but if you weren't there, we are a little higher in December than we were at the end of last year in that first group of our first bar graph. You can see at the end of last year, we're at 23.7, we're at 25.8 at the end of December, but we know we had a lot of respiratory illnesses around. Our students with high needs has come down a little from last year, as well as our English learners, our students with disabilities about the same. Our free meal eligibles come down and our homeless has come down. But however, what we've noticed that is unusual is that our students without high needs has really gone up since before the pandemic. It's still not nearly as high as the other groups of students, but it is trending in a different direction and it's going up. So we're keeping an eye on that and studying what's happening with that. Next slide, please. We're also seeing unusual trends, whereas, can you guys see the whole slide? Maybe it's just me. So the first graph bars are all other races, have gone up from 20 to 22%. And then I can't see the bottom. The second set is Black or African American students. You can see chronic absence has come down in December since last June for Black and African American. And this next set is for Hispanic, Latino of any race is coming down. And the last set of bar graphs are white students. And you'll see that for white students, chronic absence is going up. Next slide, please. And this is by grade level. You'll see the first bar is June of last year. And you'll see that we have, and the second bar is December of 2022, just this past December. We've really increased our chronic absence rate in the lower grades, kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and it starts to plateau a little bit in sixth, seventh, coming down a little bit in ninth. I know there's a lot of effort with ninth graders, so I'm not sure how that is, but pretty close for 10th and 11th, but grade 12 has come down quite a bit as well. Next slide, please. This just is to remind you that if you're on this Talk Tuesday call, your district and school are most likely required to have attendance team. And you can see from here the projection of percentage of schools and districts that are required to have school attendance teams by legislation. For the districts, the yellow band before the pandemic, we had 27.7% of districts required to have a school attendance team. Now we're at 86.5%. So 87% of our districts are required to have a school attendance team, and 66% of our schools are required to have attendance teams. So if you're the cutoff is if a district has 10% or higher, you're required to have a team, and if your school has 15% or higher, you're required to have a team. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. If you need any support or technical assistance around school attendance teams or district attendance teams, please let me know and we can hook you up. Thanks. Next slide, please. And so now it's my pleasure to introduce our partners at Attendance Works to talk to us about Connecticut Talk Tuesday High School Bright Spots. They've been working with us on a research study and interviewing some high school principals and district leaders around what they're doing to improve attendance in high school. Sorry about that. And so I'll turn it over to Helen and Inika.
Hi, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us today. We're really happy to be partnering with the Connecticut State Department of Education to understand more carefully what's going on in high schools and what we can do. As you know, high school attendance challenges are significantly different. The particular challenges that students present us with are really different than those we see in elementary grades. So we're happy to be partnering with you on this. Next slide, please. So I'm joined today by my colleague, Inika Williams, Associate Director for Policy, who has been working with me on this project. Next slide, please. So today we'll spend a little bit of time talking about the context for the project, why high school presents us with some opportunities and challenges, We'll talk a little bit about our process, what we've done so far, what the plans are for next steps, and then answer any questions. And we're really happy to have Dr. Joseph Fraiola here to talk a little bit about what's going on at Bassick High School. Next slide, please. So in the poll, if you don't mind, what kind of organization do you represent? Can you just in the chat maybe tell us where you're from? State education agency, district, school, other organization? Great. Okay. Okay, that's a district, Youth Services Bureau. Okay, schools. Great. A couple of community organizations. Wonderful. Okay, I just wanted to get a sense of who you are and where you kind of sit in the system. Next slide, please. Thank you. So,
Okay. Oh,
Anika, you're going to take over from here. Thanks.
sure. And good morning to all of you. I'm going to provide a little bit of Connecticut context. Kari has done a really great job covering a lot of kind of the data piece, but we'll go through that and then I'll turn it back over to Helen. So next slide. So pictured here is the percentage of students who are chronically absent. The data, as you can see, it's organized by grade level. And again, Kari did present the numbers here. But at a quick glance, I would love for you all to drop in the chat, where do you see the highest levels of chronic absence? And is there any other observations that you can make from reviewing this chart? Okay, so thank you, Amy. So grade 12, you see that it's the highest levels there, which is in high school. Any other observations that you all note? Okay, early testing grades are the lowest, 3 to 5. Thank you, Kenneth. Tyrone said ninth grade is pretty high as well, and those are our trends. That's our transitional grade into high school. High school overall, again, those levels are elevated. Okay, and Amy, trending lowest, dropping middle, going back up. Right, so we see this dip in middle school, and when we get to high school, those numbers are being elevated. Great observation. I also want to note that the statewide chronic absence rate for Connecticut is 23%, and for high school, it's 29%. So it's across the board, across school districts, there's this elevation in the high school grade levels. Next slide. So I'm going to talk briefly about opportunities and challenges to support attendance. Next slide. So a not so fun fact is that there was a study conducted nationwide by the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, and they reported that 75% of high school students have negative feelings towards school. Other responses was that they felt tired, they're stressed, they're bored. And one of the things that we advocate for at Attendance Works are the positive conditions for learning, as pictured here. Considering, and this is considered those foundational supports. So when we talk about the whole child, these are the many pieces that can help to support students. It's essentially just come to school. And so our positive conditions regard shares that the attendance is higher when schools implement all 4 pieces. So we have the physical and emotional health and safety. So do your students feel safe at school? Are their basic needs being met? Like, do they have clean clothes to come to school? Do they have access to food? And then there's the belonging, connection, support. Is every child connected to some kind of community within high school? And if you all remember, in high school can be very isolating, right? So are there clubs that they can join? Do they have friends? Are there enrichment activities where they can, again, find their folks, essentially? Academic challenges, engagements is the bottom piece. Are students interested in what's being taught at school? Are they engaged? Is it relevant to who they are as an individual? And then you have adult and student well-being. So with mental health, wellness becoming a more prominent focus in schools, are there resources to address this for both students and staff, since they work hand in hand? Next slide. Oh, I also want to note at the core of the positive conditions of learning is relationships. And so that is the core piece amongst all 4 pieces. So again, are students feeling connected? Do they have strong relationships with adults in your building? And that's for every child. Next slide. So challenges that students face in high school are not much different from than when we were in high school. So it's that transitioning from smaller and intimate settings to larger settings. The rigor of the classes increases. They have to, it's demands that they are more independent. There's that increase in peer pressure and bullying. Again, very similar to when we were in high school. But now you have to compound these issues with, these are students who've been through a pandemic. There's the social media piece, peer pressure is heightened times 10. And there's a rise in violence in schools, and that's across the country. And so are there basic needs being met with all of these various issues? And then we also have to add in the mental health, how that has worsened when you compare numbers from 10 years ago. And this is all happening at a very pivotal period in their lives. Next slide. And here are some other factors that we have to consider. Again, they're coming into their personal identity, the development of academic behaviors. Are they being stimulated? And so there's a lot of things going on, a lot of noise that's going on in the background when we think about challenges that high school students are experiencing that may be prohibiting them from coming to school. Next slide. In the chat, if you want to add, how can these challenges and ongoing developmental processes factor into the particular activities and supports you provide to high school students? So we're going to go ahead and add your response in the chat. How do some of these challenges impact student attendance and what's going on in your high school? Okay, so we'll give you some time to think about it. Next slide, and we'll circle back. And thank you, Amy. She shared that social work support. Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Helen.
Thank you. So I see also, Tyrone, you noted that some of the 11th and 12th grade students are now working. That's a challenge that we're also seeing across the country, both, you know, to help out family income, but also some of them are taking on other family responsibilities like childcare. And Anika mentioned, you know, the fact that the pandemic has exacerbated some of the challenges that we see in high school. I think one of the things to keep in mind as we're thinking about our high school students is the fact that many of the 9th graders had interrupted middle school experiences. So essentially, we're seeing students coming into high school who are coming from elementary school right into high school because their middle school experiences were so truncated. So thank you for the responses in the chat here, connecting students with some of those wraparound services and understanding some of the root causes of what's driving these chronic absence rates is really important. Getting the message out of clubs and activities available is another really important really important practice. One of the schools I've been talking with here in California, they promote what they call academics +2. And what they mean by that is high school students need to focus on their academics, but the +2 are those clubs and extracurricular activities that they encourage all of their students to get involved with, because that's the thing that's going to create the sense of community, the peer relationships, develop leadership, that sort of stuff. So next slide, please. I'll talk a little bit about what we've been up to here in Connecticut. Our goal is to identify high schools that can share examples of promising practices, policies, and partnerships that help reduce chronic absence at the high school level. I remember someone in the chat saying something about, I think Amy, it was you who said, do high school students have more say about whether they attend high school? That's the thing that's really different about high school, right? In elementary school, chronic absence is sort of a family thing where elementary school students or elementary age students really are dependent on their families to get them to school. In high school, students they essentially vote with their feet, right? And in some cases, we see students coming to high school and actually showing up in the building, but not coming to their classes, right? So I think understanding what the trends and patterns are, and then sort of digging into why those things are happening is a really important part of the process. So what we're doing is trying to identify some schools that seem to be doing some interesting things that others might learn from. Next slide, please. So our process was first to take a look at the quantitative data. So we looked at chronic absence rates and looked for schools that had rates that were either lower than the state average, lower than the high school average, or schools that saw notable declines in 2021-22 from years earlier. We also wanted to be sure that we included schools that serve a diverse population by ethnicity, socioeconomic status, English learner status, students with disability, and we were looking at schools who might be Title I, SIG, or Commissioner Network schools, those schools that have been working really to address some ongoing achievement issues. And once we identified the schools, we were looking to find about 10 schools. And once we identified those schools, we did some interviews with school and district leaders to try to understand first what the kind of context for the school is. So we have folks kind of describe what their school is like, and then we ask them about 10 or 15 questions about the factors that might contribute to the success that they're seeing. Next slide, please. So our goal, again, is to help folks hear from other schools that are doing some interesting work that seems to be impacting and improving their chronic absence rates. And we're in the process of developing brief summaries. They're, 2-3 page summaries that describe each school, provide some insight into some of the practices that are contributing to their success. And within those briefs, we're linking them to video where you'll be able to hear and see the school leaders describing what they think counts for their success. We're offering some of these school leaders as part of Talk Tuesdays, as we are today with Dr. Raiola. And then eventually, once we finish talking with each of the schools, we'll prepare a brief that actually looks across the schools to see what the common practices, policies, and partnerships are that might account for the success these schools are having. So that's what we're up to. I'm open to questions. I think the next slide is a question slide. Ainika and I are open to any questions that you might have. Any questions from you? Any comments to add, Kari?
No, I think it's still pretty early in the project, and interviews are happening. And we're hoping to, see some themes come out of those interviews. And it's kind of early to go there yet, but we're interested in sharing this project with you so you're aware of it happening. This year we really have spent some time on high school. We need to transition. Next year we're going to do a lot on kindergarten, first grade. But if you have some high schools that you would like to recommend that have some unique approaches for the high school population, I put in the chat, there's some districts like Norwalk and New Haven are doing twilight schools. There's some, opportunities to do remote learning opportunities for grades 9 through 12, and I put the standards in the chat. But we're really facing some pretty hard struggles in our high school attendance. And I was listening to a webinar that these ladies were actually on Friday afternoon on data and attendance, and how important that qualitative data is, and asking the questions of students instead of saying, why are you not coming to school? Asking them, why would you come to school? What would you like at school? Because we have to stop looking at this from a deficit of what's wrong to what works and what will help kids come to school. And if anybody has any of that they would like to share, I think the flexible schedules is one thing that we've heard for high school students, treating them like adults, maybe not being as punitive and more understanding when they're having struggles getting to school, and being a little more flexible with them. As relationships are key. We've learned that the learner engagement attendance program, our Connecticut's home visiting model, has seen a tremendous success with attendance in high school. And it is essentially just going to visit families and students and saying, how are you and how can we help? Instead of saying, what's wrong with you and why aren't you coming, right? And so that's some of what we're learning. This is a marathon, it's not a sprint. I'm looking forward to seeing the January data come out. I do know last year, I looked at data from last year from January to June, and we did see improvements in our data, especially in the younger years. Kids' attendance improved over the spring. So there is that good sign to look forward to. But if there's anyone, so I see a question in the chat, when can you expect the January data? Is supposed to come out Wednesday or maybe a day or two after that this week. I'm sorry it wasn't available today, but if you are having trouble accessing the monthly data and seeing like how have you improved in your district in certain grade levels and student groups from June to December or to January, or where are you seeing the struggles? I can help you with that. I do help districts analyze their data, so feel free to reach out to me. I spend a lot of time in the data. So anyone have any highlights from their high school's experience or bright spots that they'd like to share? No. Okay.
Kari, one of the other things, with regard to the, I think it was Tyrone who noted that, some of the 11th and 12th graders are needing to work, is offering credits for those work experiences, right? So we know that that can also help if you are collaborating with the places where students are working, and perhaps connect those experiences with things that are going on in school, that can be really enriching for students rather than just something completely separate. So that's a policy that might be explored. So
excellent. All right. Well, thank you, Helen and Anika. I hope you'll stay for our presentation with Joe, where I don't see Joe here, but I'm going to turn it over to Joe from Bridgeport to start talking about his experiences in Bassick High School. Thank you.
Good afternoon, or good morning, everyone.
Mhm.
Let me start by saying thank you for having me. I don't think, it's odd. I didn't think the work that we did last year was revolutionary or earth-shattering, but I think it's some simple stuff that we could do that we did that just kind of helped kids come to school every day. And it wasn't just something that we did at the building level. It was some district work too. I see a couple of my district folks are online, so. Carly and Lynn, thank you for your help with getting all this together. And, thank you for Cirque and Attendance Works and everybody else for putting this together today. So happy to share some things with everybody and field some questions at the end. Next slide. So, quick school overview. We're on the west side of Bridgeport, your typical comprehensive high school or traditional comprehensive high school. Enrollment's about 1,000. You could see, 35% African-American, 56% Hispanic Latino and a small percentage white. The free and reduced lunch meals, we're at about 70%, and we run around 30% student with disabilities, and that ELL status is even higher now. It's over 30%. So, we've got some real high needs issues here. We're in a very transient population too. We have about a 50% mobility rate here. So what that means is, although we have around 1,000 kids on the books, throughout the course of the year, we'll see 1,500 kids because 500 kids will, switch on and off our books and go to other schools, come in and out. So that really compounds the work, and creating a sense of creating a welcoming environment becomes more and more important, because we're literally getting new kids every day and kids are going somewhere else every day. It's, it's kind of a revolving door that we're contending with here. So next slide. So you could see our chronic absenteeism data. Last year we're at the 32% mark, which is, a little bit higher than the state total, but I think it's within range for the high schools, at 29%. So we were able to bring that down. Now, what that doesn't show is, gosh, just a few years prior, we were up at 55%. So, I'm really proud of the work that my staff has done, that my counselors have done, that my attendance team has done, just to get us down into that range of what I guess is within the, one standard deviation of the state total. Bringing us down in that area is really important. You could see, a couple of high spots are the free and reduced lunch students. They're popping up at 37%. You could also see our high needs kids are a little bit over our average too, but, majority of our kids are high needs as well. Oddly enough, our ELL students are down a little bit lower. But I think that this year that's actually gone in reverse, where that's ticked up a bit more. And unfortunately, our students with disabilities is, a little bit higher than the building average. One thing that is worthy to note is, one of the barriers we have here is transportation. All of our students within 2 miles of the school walk, with the exception of our students with disabilities. They're offered transportation through the IEP process. But all of our other students walk, making it even more complicated to, hold that expectation of getting to school on time, being here daily, and being active. So, it's a interesting thing that we have going on here, and a lot of other schools don't have that. Transportation is oftentimes provided. Next slide, please. So the stability we found is a pretty big component of this. I'm lucky that I'm in my 5th year here. Prior to my arrival, they had like 12 or 13 principals, whatever it was, over a long period. What I found is the community, once you set some expectations and you're here for a while, they know what to expect from a leadership team, a leadership, principal, but even my whole leadership team. They had been with me for 4 years prior. So the expectation was set not just for the families, but for the students. Regular attendance for the kids was known as a priority. And that stability is key. with the, with the high needs of our kids, being that reliable community member, that reliable adult for the kids means so much. And having that expectation of being in school daily really means a lot. This year we have a new leadership team in place. I'm still here, but I have a lot of new assistant principals, and we're seeing some different trends in attendance. I think some of it as a result of that as well. Community relations are a big thing. Again, the community trusting us. One thing that was really cool is we ended up winning a FAFSA challenge last year. And for those of you working in urban environments, you know how hard it is to get our students to complete a FAFSA. You know how hard it is to get families to trust a school to give you all of that information for a variety of reasons, whether they're undocumented, maybe they're collecting money under a table, all different things happen. So we've been fortunate with the stability that we've had here to get the community to trust us a bit more, which I think is key. The more that the school becomes the cornerstone for our students and a place of trust, the more you're going to see attendance, the more you're going to see things like a FAFSA challenge work out for you as well. Another thing too that's been pretty important, I think, is student voice. I heard Helen mention it. We've been doing a lot more interviews this year. I saw Lynn and a couple of my restorative practices people. They did some interviews recently just with students about, what's the primary reason for your absences, and we got some, interesting, qualitative data from that. We found out why it's easier or harder to attend school since the pandemic. We asked them, geez, what did they miss about the pandemic versus now? We looked at, even a positive one. Well, geez, if you could get your school a real good message about why you'd want to be here more often, what would it be? So we collected some data just this year, capturing student voice, which I think is key to this. I heard him mention earlier about, our students could vote with their feet. Yeah, they could definitely vote with their feet, and they oftentimes do vote with their feet if they don't have, meaningful adult or a reason to be in school every day. So, oddly enough, some of the things we found out from that student voice survey were things that we knew, but also reassuring. The bus came out as an issue. Start time was an issue. Some of the students have difficulty sleeping due to community issues, I think is what it is. So we actually have a mindfulness project that we're working on this year that we're going to hook those students up with some sort of mindfulness and relaxation techniques to help them sleep a little bit better at night. Personal family issues came up as a barrier for our students attending school. So, we're looking to prescribe some wraparound services for that. The other thing too that we saw was on the positive end, the students wanted to see a funner school, if that's a word, a more fun school. They were looking for more dances. They wanted more fun atmosphere. That's stuff that we as leaders could, take in and identify ways to, incentivize or help out our students with, reasons to come to school. So it was great hearing our students and doing that survey and getting that data back. And we're looking to implement some of that going forward. Next slide. So as I mentioned before, attendance is a pretty big part of life here. It's visited every day. We've made it a point in our actions that, on a regular basis, teachers are talking to kids about the importance of coming to school. And we made it a point to have connections with our students through an advisory program. I think I have a slide that talks about that in a few minutes. But we, from an administrative end, we're reviewing attendance on a regular basis. We're pushing that data out to our teachers, and we're even looking at individual teacher data and talking to those teachers that have higher percentages of attendance within their class than others. It's interesting, the conversations get real funky when you're sitting with a teacher that all the kids will go to every other class except that class. So we're having some dialogue with those individual teachers about, hey, what's going on? Why is that kid leaving early every day? Why don't they feel as though it's important to be in your classroom every day? And we're identifying some ways that we could support the teachers in creating a different environment that sets that expectation to be in the classroom on a regular basis and create a welcoming environment for our kids as well. Next slide. So advisory, I believe our advisory program is one of the things that really helped change the chronic absenteeism rate here. We put this in just before the pandemic started, and it clicked in at just the right moment because it helped us through the pandemic, to be quite honest. Our advisory program is just about building a meaningful relationship between the students and just one adult in the building. We want to ensure that every one of our kids has that connection to one adult, and the advisory is the mechanism that we're using to do that. So advisory for us meets every day, meets first thing in the morning, and students come in, they go to their advisory period, and we have some SEL work that we do with the students, whether it's guidance work with student success plans or some career pathway work that we do. The advisors are also doing some work with reviewing attendance with students and grades. So they serve as kind of almost like a mentor, kind of college advisor type of thing. They're setting goals for our kids and doing some monitoring with the students as well. We are looking at kind of adjusting the program for the next few years and adding in some student-led conferences. Again, capturing student voice we found is so important. And I think the student-led conference during an advisory would be a way to do that. We're going to, probe that with our students, see what they think, and possibly roll that out for implementation as well. We're also playing around with, right now we meet every day with advisory, but we're looking at possibly adjusting it to maybe just twice a week or 3 times a week for a longer period of time. It's really an abbreviated time, and you kind of are getting the kids in, checking in with them really quick, and serves more of a check-in, check-out program now than a full-blown advisory. So we are looking at some improvement things as well. But during the pandemic, this helped us out because the advisors were actually reaching out to the families to touch base with students that we may or may not have seen. So we were able to, kind of get a good handle on where our kids were during the pandemic, and if they needed supports, we were able to offer whatever supports we had to them. So again, that connection to the community and the family. We had a little script that we gave teachers that some of the teachers were, it was a little odd for them to reach out and do some of this warm and fuzzy work, if you would, but we had a little script for them, and they were able to reach out, and you could see that by the numbers, it paid dividends. Next slide. So we also have an after-school attendance team. This is kind of where we flag for our wraparound services. And we do 2 things. We target our kids that are at risk, first off, and we reach out to those families to see what's going on. This is an old model. I think we've all been familiar with this, that 6 to 8% range, where the student is 6 to 8% absent. And you reach out to families and you're just saying, hey, want to let you know that at 10%, you're going to be considered chronically absent. School's very important. Is there something going on that we need to be made aware of? It is a little difficult this year because, we have that COVID still real here in Bridgeport. I don't know where the rest of the call is on that, but COVID's still real. So I'm getting emails on a regular basis from families with COVID cases, and it's tough to target those. But our after-school attendance team is doing a pretty good job of reaching out to those families and flagging, okay, this is a COVID related issue, or here's what the issue is. What we're looking for too is, that student that misses 1 or 2 days a month, and getting them to get that down to 0 days a month, or maybe one day every other month. So they stay underneath that chronic absenteeism rate by the end of the year. For real extreme absences, our extreme chronically absent, we do utilize that the Leap Home Visitor Program. And we found tremendous success with that. It is difficult because it's 2 different things. We want our kids to come to school, and even if they're absent for an extended amount of time, we welcome them back with open arms. We do our best to get them re-engaged, but it's kind of counterintuitive for some of the work because you're looking to get your chronic absenteeism numbers down, and once a student's out for 30 days or 40 days, they're kind of out for that amount for the year. So we use the LEAP program to re-engage our kids, but that's, some extreme chronically absent students that we're working on that for, or some students that we're seeing some real extreme patterns right away. Next slide. Oh, and that's it. So thank you very much. If I guess I could open it up for questions. Helen and Kari? Is that next
Yes,
step?
that would be great. Questions are welcome, or if you want to share any of your successes. I guess the important thing is getting to students early before their absences add up to a level that is just tier 3 and makes it hard for kids to come back to school because they're afraid, their anxiety is up because they're behind. And LEAP is a great model for that, to get out to students before they accumulate too many absences. Right now, we're probably at about 100 days.
Yeah.
And so schools should be concerned about kids who have missed 10 to 12 days, 13 days right now, to keep them under 18.
Yeah.
Just so you're thinking in that frame of mind. I know in some districts they're looking at 6 to 8 days, but right now, if you have 6 to 8 absences, you're doing pretty good. If you have 10 to 12, we would be concerned and want to keep you from going further down that track. Does anyone else have any comments they'd like to share or responses? Joe, I love the advisory. It's all about relationship. You know, you mentioned Check and Connect. That is a research-based model where students who are you know, at risk of chronic absence have an adult that they check in with every day. It's on the web. It's pretty easy to find. There's also the 2x10 model where you pick a student and match a student and adult, and make sure I get this right. And that the adult spends 2 minutes a day for 10 days with that student, just getting to know them and greeting them. And seems like a low cost, kind of higher impact. So you can Google 2x10 is another relationship building model that I really have learned more about recently that I like. Anyone else have anything they'd like to share? Hi, Jeannie. I see your hand.
One thing that in the high school is what we're trying to adopt is that we're talking to kids. Usually we talk to parents and ask the parents, you know, why is the kid out? You know, the reasons why, but we really haven't sat down with the kids and asked them the reasons why they're out. So it was very interesting to hear why from the parent and the why from the student. And it was totally different. And to hear that from a child, it was mind-boggling to understand, you know, it wasn't a lie. It wasn't about lying. It wasn't about the parent making excuses for the child. The child was just saying, in other words, my parent doesn't push me. You know, if my parent doesn't push me, what am I going to do? If my parent has to leave early, I'm going to stay in bed. I'm not getting another phone call to wake me up in the morning to tell me, get your behind to school or whatever the reason was. So to sit the kids down and do that chat with them instead of getting on the phone with the parent and asking them, you know, we see that, you know, the child has a few extra absences. Let's try and nip that in the bud. To see the difference talking to a child and talking to a parent, it was so refreshing to see that and to hear, like Dr. Raiola said, to hear from the children what they want, what is it that they want to see to feel comfortable and welcome in their school. Because the one thing that a child needs is that champion, that when you go to school, you need that person in that school that you can confide in and feel trusted and feel trusted in to be comfortable in a school, because you don't know the real story from that child. If he was sleeping in a car, if he was sleeping in a couch, did he have dinner that night before? If the parent was incarcerated, all of a sudden something happened. We don't know. We don't know what happened. So it's not fair to say you came in late with the same pants you had on yesterday. You're late, you know, go to the office without understanding the root cause of the reasons why this child is sleepy, is still hungry. So to talk to them separately and do that chat with them it's really interesting, because it doesn't line up with what the parents are saying to us. It's really the kids to tell us. And I'm talking about the high school level. Because those kids are real and they're going to tell you if you get them comfortable, You
Yeah.
get them in that mode that they're not embarrassed about it. You get them in that mode that they're comfortable with. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie. The student's voice is crucial. And I wrote in the chat, Bridgeport has done a great job of using their panorama data. Some of you may use the DESA tool, but there's a lot of really rich data in these surveys and behavioral assessment that we're doing of our students that can help you inform why they're making decisions or what's happening with them as well. So, yeah. And I saw a question in the chat. Let me see. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
this is Lynn Stevens in Bridgeport. If I just want to underscore this conversation about student voice, because I had the opportunity to sit in on the focus group with Bridgeport. And, as I was looking at the slides from today's presentation and the attendance work slide with the 4 components around student attendance, I could have easily said, that's exactly what our students said. That was what they represented in the focus group. But talking to the students gives it life. It's motivating, and it's really working restoratively. It's giving them the voice and giving them the power to help support change. And I think a great example, as Dr. Riola mentioned, was the mindfulness session around sleep that we're providing. This was something that was really identified by the students, and it's twofold, really. Hopefully it gives them some strategies, but I also think it shows them that we're listening and we're responding. So it develops that relationship again. So I can't recommend it enough.
Thank you, Lynn.
I wanted to comment for a sec on something that Jeannie said that resonated with me. I think oftentimes our parents think that they don't have to help out much in high school, that the kids are old enough to just kind of do their own thing. We're starting to explore here. I have a social worker and a retired school psychologist, and we're looking at starting a little program for parents. It has to be the right parent and meet the right profile, but some counseling services for the parents to help them understand what it is to be a parent in high school and how to work a little bit better with your students at home. We're just seeing time and time again that the parents, when they get to high school, sometimes they've got little brothers and sisters, so they don't worry about them, and they just don't really understand the importance and what they need to do. So, student voice is important, but getting the parents involved too, I think, is super important as well. So we're looking at something along those lines.
Parents matter even in high school, right?
Very much so. Yeah,
they want to know they're cared for and loved.
Yeah, it's a weird model because we hold the kids' hands until high school, and then we just tell them, all right, go to class. Good luck. I don't, in what world is that? It's when you think about it, it's just an odd thing. So, the ninth grade cohorts mean a lot, and all that transition work means a real lot, and supporting the parents means a real lot as well.
And when you get to high school, you see the lack of the parents, and that's the problem. You see the lack of, because they're big enough, they can go on their own, they can walk by their own, they can take on public transportation, they're big enough. But you see that lack, but you see some, that can't say all, but you see that lack of, but that's where you have to just bring them back and say, it's still your child.
Exactly.
You're responsible for your child, you still have that responsibility. So that's where we have to, try and hit it.
I will say I found that if I've had very few instances where I've reached out to a parent that doesn't want to help, but they just want to know what to do to help. That's been my experience. Is I could get them on the phone and, hey, look, here's what I need from you. Okay, no problem, I'll help you out here. But oftentimes they're just a little bit confused about how to help and what they need to do at home. So I think there's some work that could be done there to build the community up a little bit stronger.
Thank you, Joe. Tim, I see your hand and I see your question in the chat. So why don't you go ahead next?
Never mind the question. This is a very interesting conversation. So I don't know about the rest of everybody, but I'm just seeing more and more a lot of fear out of parents, fear to push their students due to their mental health, fear to bring them in, fear to engage. Not like physical fear, like they're not afraid that their student's going to physically confront them, but just fear to push them and thus exacerbate their whatever emotionally or socially they're going through. I know it was said before when we were looking at the state data, how the impact of social media has on this. You go back to when we were going through high school, you had that break. You got out of school and you had that 10-hour break before you had to like kind of face school again. And the students now are just having that 24-hour a day kind of assault on their confidence, on their social emotional well-being. And then, they don't want to come in, and the parents are afraid to push them to come in because they're seeing some of these negative things. So I'm just wondering, I know like a lot of the community agencies, they try to reach out, and the schools obviously try to work in partnership with the community agencies, but I don't know, like parents are lost, kind of going with Dr. Arriola was saying, like just they're lost. They want to know what to do, but there's that fear to engage. And I'm seeing that more and more, especially in my community. I don't know if anybody else is seeing that as well.
Yeah, the role of the parents in high school and how to support parents in high school is different than, we do a lot around parent engagement in the younger years. But one of the things I noticed from the trends is you start to see chronic absence rates start to go up from fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, just starts to go up, creep up. And that's as parents and folks start to think kids are okay, we can let go a little bit. But maybe we're letting go a little too much, right, for some of these kids, and they need more support and just love and care. Know that they're loved, know that they're cared, know that we got your back. And maybe more of that. So, Helen and Anika, maybe looking into like how do we support and engage high school parents. I love this counseling, or maybe some parent clubs or parent sessions to support high school kids.
Yeah, it's definitely something we can continue to push on as we speak with more people. As we're right in the middle of things, so we have more conversations scheduled. So
yeah. And again, if you would like to be considered or have a voice in this project, please let us know and put your name in the chat or your school in the chat, and we'll be happy to connect with you. But yeah, how do these parents support their high school students? So, okay, with that, we have 2 minutes. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Christine, and she's going to give you an update on our next coming session. Thank you, Helen, Anika, and Joe, and everyone who chimed in. This has been a great conversation. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Kari. Thank you, everyone. Absolutely such a great conversation. So just upcoming attendance, we have our 2 sessions, and that's actually going towards the end of winter now, getting into spring. So yay, March 7th and March 21st. March 7th, we're looking to continue the conversation with LEAP. We have to just make some confirmations on that, and possibly a focus on the younger grades within the LEAP model. And then March 21st, we are looking to possibilities, possibly 504, and having a conversation around that. But those are the 2 dates that are up and coming next as we move forward, and we'd love to see you. And then here are also our email and contact information. Please keep in touch. I just wanted to say really quickly that CERC has moved from Middletown to Waterbury, our office building. The last week, our server and emails were completely down. So I do apologize if we haven't gotten much information out to you. It looks like we are up and running at the moment. And it's an exciting move, but it's also a transition period. So if you do call us, or if there's a delay in the emails or the calls, just know we are here. We're going to be as responsive as we can. But we thank you for joining us today. Great conversation, and thank you to all the presenters.
Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Have a great week.